Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you guys are new here, welcome. I'm Amber Rose, also known as the Religious Hippie. You can basically follow me on any social media platform, or you can go straight to my website at thereligioushippie.com. And my goodness, do I have a treat for you guys today. Today, we have with us a special guest. Gabi from Gabi After Hours is with us, and I am so happy because this has been a topic I've been wanting to discuss for a very long time. So welcome, Gabi. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. And I want to say before we get started, thank you for your ministry. Thank you for everything you do online. I work with high school students, and one of the things that we do is we give them a sheet of good social media, and your name is at the very top. The
Oh, that's
fact that
so
you're
sweet.
you're a wonderful young woman who's living her faith, who's zealous for the faith, who doesn't water anything down, brings people up to a higher level of holiness. So thank you so much, and please keep doing what you're doing.
Wow, thank you so much. That means so much to me. And I know that these high school students are going through so much right now. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad that the ministry can be of aid to them in some way and that
Yeah.
hopefully it helps because honestly, all through God's hands, he's
N-
just a tool in his hands.
No, keep going. I know like people sometimes put us on a pedestal, but we're both dogs just trying to
Yep.
follow the master. But keep following, because I know a lot of young women who watch you and listen to you. So don't stop no matter
Thank
what you do.
you.
So
That
keep it
means a
up.
lot. It's so hard sometimes too. I know you know how that is sometimes too.
Yeah.
When it all gets really rough, but it's all worth it because even if it
Yes.
saves one soul, that's how we
Yes.
know. And so, yeah, wow. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
My
And
pleasure.
our topic is it involves actually high schoolers to an extent and
Yes.
actually everybody. But we're talking about lust, we're talking about pornography, we're talking about sexual sins, and then
Yeah.
hopefully finding freedom from that. And it's so difficult in a world that's so saturated by pornography. You can't go on a highway without passing a billboard
Right.
for a strip club or something.
Yeah.
It's gotten so bad.
And it's worse. It's worse than what it appears. So, as you know, we have temptation from three places. We have our very own flesh makes it hard enough to be good and to be holy. But then, as you said, the world really, like every song, every time you turn on the television and you see sex, and I've seen a lot of sex on television, unfortunately, and it's never between a married man and a married woman. It's always like the wife is the bad person, and sometimes you're even cheering on their affair. It's really bad. And for young people, period, even if they're not Catholic, they're just saturated with this. They're being fed from the time that they're a child that sex out of marriage, whether that's alone or with others, is the only thing that will make you happy. That's the goal. And it's terrible. And add to that cell phone freedom to use and look at pornography
Oh
whenever you
yeah,
want. If you give in to the temptation to lust in your heart, you're basically doomed in seconds. So
it's so
I'm very
true.
thankful that you're addressing this.
Yeah, no, I think my generation especially has a really big issue with sample culture, I like to call it,
Mhm.
where they have to try things out before they commit to
Uh,
anything.
yeah.
So they have to live together first. They have to have sex together first. They have to know what it's like first. And it's like one of my friends was telling me, if you know the character of that person and you know they're a good person, they're going to
Hmm.
change anyways. We all change over
Right.
time. But if you know the
Right.
character and the heart of that person, how they change shouldn't matter all that much because they'll stay true to their core.
Right. They're rooted in truth. So it's so important that people, if you're getting in relationships, it's not popular to say, but you have to be in a relationship with somebody who believes the exact same things that you do, that believes that sex out of marriage is a mortal sin, etc., and that your salvation depends upon sacramental life. Because if you don't have, it's hard enough, like even if you don't have pornography, if you don't have all these influences, two good people who love each other and like they spend time together, it's hard to be pure. But when you add to that the statistic that most people are exposed to pornography now as young as the age of 9, it's very, very dangerous, especially as you get into relationships. A lot of times I will hear from people, it's just kind of an excuse that they make. They'll say, it doesn't hurt anybody. It hurts a lot, way more than you realize, because we're made in the image and likeness of God, and God created our souls to be a complete gift of self to another. When I commit a sin of lust with my body, I am rejecting the very image of God in my soul. And so you
Mhm.
have two choices at that point. You have the choice to repent and fight against that temptation to lust, or you fight against God and you reject God. And so when you look at the culture that's so hostile to the Catholic faith, a large part of that is rooted in sexual sin. And then if you look at, murders, and you look at child abuse and all these other sexual sins, our sexuality at its core is deeply rooted in the dignity of the human person. So if sex is not important, if I can have sex with anybody, with anything, with myself, looking at pictures, that means the human life that is created by sex is not valuable. And so when we live in a disposable culture, it impacts everything. It impacts the way, if you're a married man, it impacts the way you treat your wife. If you're a father, it impacts the way you treat your children. It impacts the way you view the checkout person at the grocery store. Are they only valuable because they're doing something for me? And then even deeper than that. So this is why most people do not overcome their sexual faults and their sexual sin. And I'll share with my own story later if you'd like.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
there's a diabolical element at play. So the devil wants me to be confused about my sexuality. So at my core, I am my sex. I am a man, and you're able to distinguish if I'm a man or not, just looking at my DNA, by taking my blood, by just looking at the very fabric of my physical being, regardless of sexual, organs. I'm a man through and through, to the depth of my soul. So if the devil can confuse my sexuality, it's over for me. And it's even deeper because, so you and I suffer from temptation regularly. The devil tempts everybody. He whispers to us on a daily basis, thoughts of despair, of sadness, of doubt. But those are, so he can have us do one thing, and that's commit a mortal sin. Once we commit a mortal sin, we reject God. We say to God the Father, I don't want you. We say to Jesus Christ, I'm no longer a temple of the Holy Spirit. I'm no longer a member of your body. And so we are now under the dominion of the devil, and we're heirs to the kingdom of hell. And we open ourselves up to extraordinary diabolical attacks. And so getting rid of possession, we have two types that we have to be very careful with, especially if you look at pornography. And that's a local infestation, is that when you commit a lot of mortal sin, you're looking at porn all the time inside of your bedroom or in the bathroom or at work. You are telling the devil or demons, come here to this place. This is where you're welcome here. This is my location. But even bigger, and this is at the heart of why so many people, young and old, are straight up addicts, is because they get influenced in a personal infestation. So that's an obsession. So a lot of people, and I experienced this myself when I was in college, it's not just like I'm feeling lustful and I'm trying to scratch an itch that I have. For many people, and I would say most who are addicted to pornography, it becomes, I have no willpower. I don't want to look at this. It's ruining my life. It's ruining my friendships. It's ruining my study habits. It's ruining the time that I have, my free time. And I can't control it. It's almost as if I'm trying to drive a car and an invisible force is grabbing the steering wheel and trying to run me off the road. And I have seen people in my own life as well who have been addicted to pornography from childhood think that if I just get off, or if I get married, if I get off of pornography, it's going to happen when I get married. It does not happen. It ruins their family. It destroys their relationships. The demon of lust enters the home through the father. The children all have this diabolical attack because of the father being the head of the family. So it's so deep. And the devil's main goal is to utterly destroy a person. So you can say, I have this hidden vice. I have this hidden vice. It's just between me and myself, and it doesn't impact anybody else. One day it will. One day it will. One day you might be in the grocery store and you put your camera underneath a girl's skirt, or one day you try to meet a prostitute, and the devil's going to ruin you, and you have to be free of this. And if you know that you're a slave, you need to do anything necessary and be willing to do anything necessary to be free of this. And one of the questions that I get a lot of teenagers asking me questions because I'm a youth minister, and they're good kids. So like, you would think, oh, that kid is such a model student. He's like Boy Scout. He's got a family that they all go to church together. They pray together as a family. And that kid is the one who's struggling with pornography. One, because they have a cell phone. If I know it's impossible for you to have a pornography addiction, for example, if you don't have access to pornography. So,
True.
and I have met like the best kids who you would think if anybody has their life together, it's that kid, and they don't. Every single good kid that I know that has a cell phone has an addiction to or struggles with temptations towards solitary sin and pornography. It's just, you have to cut it out. There's like a certain age range that you do not have the virtue of purity. It's just impossible to deal with. But a lot of times they'll ask me, Mr. Gabe, why does God allow this to happen to me? And the answer, the only answer I've come up with is humility. It's very humbling to fall and to fall and to fall, and to admit to a priest or to a friend or to a mentor that you are struggling with sins of the flesh. It's very humbling. And what God desires is that we are completely dependent upon him. So a lot of people will struggle, they'll fall, they say, I'm praying, I'm doing this, but God wants us to, for our own holiness, to be at a point in our life where we say, it's all you, Lord. I am 100% dependent upon you. I love you with all my heart, with all my soul. I don't want to be this. I want you to transform me into who it is you want me to be. And if you can get to that point in your life, and the faster you get to that point, the more freedom you'll have. I'll let you jump in because I just kind of like
No,
exploded with
please. I
information.
think no, it's perfect because I think those are very powerful words. And like you were saying with the ripple effect, it doesn't just affect you, it affects the people who are producing the pornography, the people who are in it. And then on top of that, the spiritual implications that come with that. And then on top of that, how it ripples down from you to your kids. Even if you're, I know a lot of people don't talk about women being addicted to pornography.
Yes, yes.
But I was addicted when I was 13. I was introduced to it by a peer, a fellow peer. He was 15, I was 13. And he introduced me to it, and I had no idea. And he also introduced me to sexting. And while
Wow.
nothing happened specifically,
Mhm.
it was still, my innocence was gone. It was like
Yes.
every little bit of my childhood was shattered.
Yeah.
And nobody knew. I mean, I hid it so well. I was so good at
Right.
hiding it. Not even my parents knew. Otherwise, they obviously would have intervened.
Right.
But had they known, they probably wouldn't have let me have a phone, and they
Yeah.
didn't know. And so
Yeah.
at around 15, I ended up getting my first phone, which just kind of, sent the pornography addiction into high swing because now all of a sudden I had access to the internet. And even though my parents put on parental locks and stuff,
Mhm.
I was a smart kid. I mean, I I was digital savvy. I could get through any block, any kind of password they put up. I was like, I know every password they know. And so I got to that point when I was younger, probably about 13 to 16, where I hit what you talked about, where I didn't wanna do it anymore, but I felt like I had no control over it, and
Mhm.
it led to outbursts. I started dyeing my hair black. I started, being really moody, and, I had my emo phase, let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Really
But the
dark
emo
music.
phase was reflecting what was inside a little bit.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And the one thing that always hit me was nobody asked me, "Are you okay? Is there anything
Right.
going on that you wanna talk about?" People just viewed it as a phase. They were like, "Oh, everybody has an emo phase. Everybody goes through this." It's like the blue eyeshadow phase. It's
Right.
like, no, there was something bigger going on there,
Right.
but nobody really knew me well enough to be like, "Oh, hey, I noticed you're acting out more, or this is happening or that's happening. Are you okay?"
Right.
Um, and so I'm so glad that those high school students have somebody like you to go to be like, "Hey, is this normal? Is that not normal? Can you help me?" Because not everybody's situation allows them to go to their friends or family,
Right.
because
Yeah,
not everyone
definitely.
has a trusted adult. And so I think that's wonderful that they can do that. And so for me, battling with my pornography addiction until I was 18, and I finally decided one day, you know what? I'm not gonna do this anymore. And God must have given me some graces
Yeah.
because after, almost 9, no, 7 years ish of not being able to break this pornography addiction from being introduced to it as a young teen, all of a sudden it was like I cut cold turkey and I never looked back.
Wow.
And I had no explanation for that because I had no control over it for years. No control. I felt completely helpless. And then I started kind of tinkering with the idea of going back to church, and when I
Mm.
started doing that, little miracles started happening where, like, I found my childhood rosary that I lost for 8 years, and, just little things that would happen, and it kind of was the catalyst for me coming back into my faith. But
Yeah.
that being able to cut out that pornography addiction was so profound to me looking back because I had no control, or at least I felt like it.
Yeah. And I think of your ministry now, and no doubt Our Lady was giving you special graces so that you would be able to witness to a life of purity and striving to live virtue. So I'm super thankful for that. Yeah, I was also exposed around 13-ish. It was a different generation though, because we didn't have cell phones at the time. So it was like all computer based. And it was really, really, really bad. And there was a time when I was in college where I was doing it because I wanted to. I was like, I like this. This is great. You know, you can look at any woman you want, etc. And then a nun had confronted me. It was like during Lent, and she was like, I was like, "What, sister? What should I give up? What should I give up for Lent?" And I was a very public sinner, and she was like, "How about mortal sin, Gabriel? How about you stop sinning mortally?" And I was like, "Sister, easy, easy." And so that night I had gone home and I was like, you know what? I'm going to try and stop committing mortal sin. I'm not going to look, first thing I'm not going to do that I normally would do is I'm not going to look at pornography. And even though I had made that resolution and I was really set in it, I fell within like 2 hours of being home. And I quickly realized, I was like, wait a second. It just like, I had a moment of clarity. It was a great grace. It was a moment of clarity. And God was like, you're not sinning because you want to. You have an addiction. And so I started crying and weeping over my sins. It was like true contrition, which is kind of rare. And I heard audibly in my ears a scary voice saying exactly what I was saying, but in the most audible, like horrendous, high-pitched, screeching voice. God, have mercy on me. God, forgive me. Oh, and it was like it was really disturbing. And I had said out loud, I was like, St. John Vianney, pray for me. And it went away. And so the next day I was home alone and my mom was in the other room. So I wasn't technically alone, but basically I was alone because she lived on her side of the house and I lived on my side of the house. And I took out a rosary pamphlet and I was reading it and I was like, okay, how do you pray this rosary thing? I was like, all right, I believe. In the moments that I said the words, I believe, a force literally grabbed me by the throat, slammed me on the bed, was holding me down and choking me. And I as you would probably be freaking out. And I was like screaming or trying to scream for my mom, but no words came out of my mouth. And I heard a voice inside of my head, which I think is my guardian angel, say, pray. And I couldn't get anything out. And then it said, pray in your mind. And so in my mind, I began to say the Hail Mary. And then my mouth was kind of open and I was able to gasp out, Hail Mary. And the moment that I got the words Hail Mary out of my mouth, everything went back to normal. And I recognized at that point that I had opened myself up to something very, very sinister that was controlling my life, trying to ruin my life. And that the Virgin Mary was going to be absolutely and utterly critical for me to overcome this diabolical force. And we can start to get into things that will work. And I can only share what worked for me. I'm so thankful that you had freedom and that you had a special grace. So there are other ways. I know Matt Fradd has a channel dedicated to pornography freedom. I know for a fact the way that I got out has worked for every single, and I normally talk to guys, has worked for every single man that has ever tried it. They have had utter and complete success, so much so that Our Lady, what her job is to not just crush the head of the serpent, not just to stop the devil, but she utterly humiliates him. And the men who have tried the method that I'm going to recommend not only overcame their sin, but now they're going out and teaching other people how to also overcome their vices. But it has to be, for most people, it has to be a dual attack. It has to be a spiritual attack and it has to be practical. So just practically, you avoid the near occasion of sin. You don't put yourself in circumstances where you have sinned before. You're like, if every night after 10 p.m. when my family goes to bed, I commit mortal sin, guess what? Go to bed at 10 p.m. Have a disciplined life. Do fasting, control the body, control the appetite so that every movement towards lust or towards the flesh, you don't think that that means that I'm going to get involved in that. When you go to confession, I'm putting this in the practical category because admitting that you have a problem, admitting that you're wrong is absolutely 100% necessary. But when you go to confession, you have to make the resolution to avoid the unnecessary near occasions of sin. unnecessary near occasions of sin. So unnecessary meaning I don't need to be having Safari on my phone. So have somebody who's accountable take Safari off of your phone. You can have the freedom to have apps on your phone that you might need, like Uber or things like that, but it's not necessary that I'm able to Google whatever I want at any moment that I want, wherever I want, whenever I want. So every time you go to confession, cutting back on some other freedom temporarily, just until you have the interior strength. Fasting, if you're in dating relationships, because usually our interior lust will carry out into other people's life. At least it did for me, because when I was looking at pornography, my goal was to satisfy my sexual urge. So I would begin to look at women as the means to that end. So when you're in a relationship, also avoiding the unnecessary near occasions of sin. If you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you became passionate when you were in the car, well, guess what? You just lost the freedom to be in the car alone, because you obviously don't have the willpower, and it's not necessary that you're alone together in the car. You can still have intimate conversations and spend time together walking through a park where other people can see you, if you know, and you're trying to protect yourself and other people. But for me personally, praying the rosary was really, really, really absolutely critical to fighting my attack. And I say this to guys today too, but for myself, I noticed when I prayed the rosary, the temptations weren't as strong. I would still receive temptations, but I was able to fight back with them. And then I prayed. How many rosaries did it take me to not commit a mortal sin today? I prayed 4 rosaries. When I prayed 4 rosaries, the temptation to commit mortal sin, I was able to fight back. Our Lady is purity. When you pray the rosary, she purifies the mind. When you think about the life of Christ, how can you combat these ugly pictures that we have in our minds? By thinking of the crucifixion, by thinking of the nativity of Jesus. And it's a death. Like, that's why I say, like, you can have freedom. You don't have to be a slave to the devil, but the only way I have found freedom is by being a slave to the Virgin Mary. Like, pick your slavery. And Mary's slavery is beautiful and loving, and it's just true freedom. I don't know a man alive who has found freedom on his own without the Virgin Mary. People ask, sometimes people think, can you read my soul? I'm like, no, I can't read your soul. I just assume if you're not praying the rosary that you're not being pure. Like, I don't know how to be pure without Mary, and I'm a normal dude, so I can't imagine that you're pure without the Virgin Mary, because you're just a high schooler, and I've had years of trying virtue. Another thing about the confession, I found this helpful for myself, is that when I began to confess the things that led me into mortal sin. So for example, I would start to confess, I was on YouTube, I was scrolling through, I saw a video of women's gymnastics. I stopped and I watched it because of sexual curiosity. And so confessing the things that led me to the next step. Confessing, forgive me, Father, for I've sinned. I was at the grocery store, or I was at the gym, and this immodest woman walked by, and I took a second glance, and I took a third glance. And so those are the things. The devil doesn't just, drag you straight to hell. He uses the path of least resistance. He knows you're not just going to go straight from the confessional to the internet. He knows that, okay, well, if I can just get him to compromise on a second glance, if I can get him to compromise on what he watches on YouTube, like in most men that I've talked to, their cycle was taking a second glance, going to YouTube, going to pornography. So when you begin to confess the small things and cut the root at the very beginning before the weed can grow, I found for myself that I was able to make much, much greater progress. But you have to be very disciplined, and you have to say it's possible, because some people say it's impossible. It's not impossible. It's possible, and you can do it. But Father Ripperger, who is, as you know, is a very famous exorcist. When people come to him, I bet, yeah, it's your kind of guy.
Oh yeah.
Mine too. He would say that when people come to him for deliverance, they have the Liber Christo method. And what it is having a rule of life where you're praying in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, in that discipline of having morning prayer, day prayer, evening prayer, having a schedule, having a routine, getting into a rule of life is absolutely critical for overcoming diabolical attacks. And so the rosary is simply an easy method to do that. So for me personally, I wake up 30 minutes before I'm supposed to leave. I pray a rosary in the morning. I pray a rosary midday. I pray a rosary in the late afternoon. I stay up a little bit later and I pray a rosary before bed. And that guards me, protects me, keeps Christ and Mary as the center of my life. But for me, when I first started overcoming my sin, I had to go to confession every single day because I was messed up. Like I was not in a good place. I had to go to confession every day. I stopped doing that. I don't recommend people do that because then confession can be part of the abusive cycle. And I know many men it is. They'll confess, they'll go 2 days and be back in the confessional. So I recommend if you're really like an addict, you're really struggling, don't go to confession any more than once a week. Just go once a week, explain to the confessor you have a problem, and every week try to cut back the number of sins that you're involved in. That. But then for me, I had to go to Mass every single day. I had to be in front of the Blessed Sacrament. If I couldn't go to Mass, I had to spend at least 15 minutes with Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament because he's our freedom. And you can't find, like, he is freedom. Like, he is freedom. Those who follow Christ have freedom. And you go into the chapel and you don't leave until your mind is right and your heart is right. Things change. So I know it sounds like this is like all a spiritual thing, but the devil is real. I think that when he's attacking you, you have to lean on the spiritual. And so there's an error in thinking it's only spiritual. There's an error in thinking it's only physical.
Yeah, I agree. I also think it's so important that we do hold ourselves accountable because, and if you can't hold yourself accountable, find an accountability partner, like you were saying.
Yeah.
I think that's something that's so missed these days is people think that they have to battle this on their own. And
Right.
like you said, it's not a battle to be won on your own. You need
Right.
spiritual help, but you also need mental and physical help, whether that's from a priest or a trusted guardian. I know a lot of kids who, again, are afraid to tell anybody because they're afraid.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing is wrong. They're afraid of being punished, but they don't know what else to do. And so it's really important that we can find people like that who are trustworthy. And I know for myself, I mean, yeah, I had the graces to be over the pornography addiction. I no longer wanted to look at it, but I was still dating somebody at the time who was addicted to it. And
Yes.
that was so difficult because we were
Yeah.
dating, and I don't know how the spiritual, filter works exactly, but I noticed when I was around him, it was so much harder to fight the temptations, not because we would do anything or he would even talk sexually to me or anything, but the spiritual presence of a lustful demon being there, and then
Yeah.
taking like at least 24 to 48 hours to get rid of it when I would get home.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
awful.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. Speaking of that, that reminds me. So there's an exorcist in Nashville, Tennessee. He was on the Michael Knowles show, and this is when I saw it. And he said that he was working with about 500 men in his parish who were coming because he was like, you got to stop this stuff. And they were coming to him, failing. And then they did their consecration to St. Joseph. He bought 500 copies of Father Calloway's book, Consecration to St. Joseph. And he said that the strides that they made after that were absolutely remarkable. And I was not struggling with pornography at the time that I did my consecration to St. Joseph, but I was still confessing things like, Father, forgive me for I've sinned. There was a beautiful woman. I noticed her again. And these are like, I know that compared to what some people are struggling with, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you know how it is, when you're like going to the confessional on a regular basis and you're trying to like root something out, and I was just like not having success in that. When I did my consecration to St. Joseph, I don't know what it is, but something inside of me changed, and I was given like a special strength just to be a better man, to have a heart of his heart, I guess, to have a heart of a father that would stop, like just stop and say, it would just be instinctive. Like, this is somebody's daughter. This is a daughter of God the Father. This is somebody made in the image and likeness of God. It just changed. Something changed in my eyes. Something changed in my heart. So if there's anybody watching and you've done your Marian consecration and you're committed to Mary, I give you my word, something special will happen when you give your life to St. Joseph.
I mean,
Um,
one of his names is the Terror of Demons.
the terror of demons, yes, and he's got the most pure heart of any man that's ever lived. So I do
It's just
recommend that.
crazy. Yeah, I love Saint Joseph. He's been my spiritual, father for ever since I could remember, honestly. I remember having when I was really little, having a Saint Joseph rosary. It was like this beautiful forest green color, and I had a
Yes.
Saint Joseph statue, and I just loved Saint Joseph as a child. And I still felt, even though I left the church for 8 years and I was in very
Hmm.
sinful ways and stuff, I still felt like he was watching over me because
Right.
there were so many times when I could have, you know, really messed my life up, really. Like, the people I was hanging out with were not great, they were doing drugs, they were having sex outside of marriage, and I never conformed to that. And to me, it was a blessing because I'm
Yes.
a people pleaser, so I would bend over backwards for these people, but
Mm.
I'd never had sex, I never did drugs, I never drank before I was 21, and it's crazy to me that I feel like Saint Joseph really had a shield around me, and
Yes.
I actually have a question for you because I know you're a dad and, like,
Sure.
you struggle, with everything going on in the world, and you have young kids. How do you protect them
Yes.
from these types of things? How do we
Yes.
make them feel comfortable enough to come to us in these
Right.
situations?
So I've talked to my son about mortal sin and the dangers of pornography and addiction in age appropriate ways. I wouldn't be like, very explicit or anything, but as he gets older, and he never, he doesn't have a smartphone. He has a Wise phone, which looks like a smartphone. And then I warned him, these are the dangers, etc. This is why I'm doing this. Like, there's just no way. When I was in college, I was trying to be good and I was struggling. There's no way on God's green earth that an eighth grader is going to be able to resist that temptation.
Mm,
But now that, so I know for a fact, I would bet my life on it. My son does not have an addiction to pornography, even though many of his peers do. How do I know? Because he has no access whatsoever. So I don't, do I shelter him? A little bit, not really. But we go to the movies, we talk about things, he goes to my talks, he hangs out with all the same kids that he hangs out with, that I have in my youth group. So kids that are struggling, kids that are in public school. So it's like I give him a lot of freedom, but I just know that there's no access to pornography, and he knows from seeing his friends, from hearing their struggles, that they're struggling.
mm,
And so he's able to see just how poisonous it is, that some of his really, really, great friends who are nurtured well at home are struggling. And then some of the other friends that he has that haven't been nurtured are struggling with the same thing. So I think that he sees, like, yeah, this is seriously dangerous.
mm.
But I monitor, it's not that, and it's not like I'm on my phone, like monitoring, and like, I have got like a computer system and I've got 15 monitors. I'm like, what is he doing over there? Like, I myself make sure that I'm pure. If I'm ever tempted towards impurity, I remind myself that I am the spiritual father, that I am the umbrella, I am the protection. Every night, I bless my children with holy water. Their rooms are very sacramentalized. They have large crucifix in their room, picture of St. Joseph, picture of the Virgin Mary. Every night before bed, I put my hands on their head. I ask the Holy Spirit to come upon them. I ask the Virgin Mary to give them a sense of their presence while they sleep, while they rest. Just because temptation comes at night, a lot of people say that they're attacked by, demons of lust in the middle of the night. They'll wake up with certain things. I believe that's real. Like, some of it might be hallucination, some of it might be your body acting up. That's true. But I also believe that there's diabolical forces that might wake you up in the middle of the night, because I feel like I've been woken up in the middle of the night with those same kind of attacks. So by doing that, I really truly believe that the sacraments and the sacramentals of the church are strong enough to keep your children holy and happy. So
Mm,
if you, for parents that are watching, or for young adults who are going to have children one day, if you follow 4 basic principles: confession, adoration, rosary, Eucharist, I give you my word, and if you guard them from unnecessary exposure to the internet, or free reign to look at the internet without any sort of supervision, because my kids use the internet, they have to do homework assignments, but it's in a public place where people are constantly coming in and out, where we just have basic prudence involved. But if you have a regular confession life, if you're taking your children to confession at least once a week, I make sure my children go to confession at least once every 2 weeks. My son goes he goes every week, I go every week. because we're both strong men with normal hormone levels, well, higher than normal hormone levels. Let's pretend. Let's pretend no low T. All right, edit that part out. I'm just kidding. I know it's live. So,
but it's true. I mean, we see
Yeah.
testosterone levels decreasing these days. So
yes, because the
Honestly-
estrogen in the water because of artificial contraception. Whole nother topic.
we should have a podcast about that.
Yeah. So if you take your children to confession regularly from a young age, from the age of reason, from the age of 7, they're used to going to confession on a regular basis. When they are exposed to pornography, when they are exposed to their boyfriends or their girlfriends tempting them to commit sin, then they have the habit of going to another person saying, I don't want to do this. Give me the grace, asking God for mercy. Then they will be committed to Christ because they know his love, they know his mercy. So regular confession schedule. At minimum, take your children to adoration at least once per week. Age appropriate, of course. When you have a 2-year-old, take your 2-year-old into the chapel. Say, look, there's Jesus. Just 2 seconds, 3 seconds, wave, come out. That as often as possible. But my children have a weekly holy hour that they're signed up for every single Saturday, 7 p.m. You'll know where to find us. We're in the Adoration Chapel. And they develop their own relationship with Jesus Christ. We pray the rosary every single day as a family. My son prays 4 rosaries a day on his own. My daughter, they're not quite there yet, but he needs it. He needs it, and he knows he needs it. And then we receive Holy Communion every Sunday, but also my children, I make sure that they receive Holy Communion at least one more time a week. But my son, he goes to Mass every single day as well. But he's only that good, and he's not perfect. He's a rascal and a scoundrel and the son of his father, which is not,
as little boys are,
not an easy thing to have. Yeah. But the graces are there, and he's very, very, very good, as embarrassing that as that might be for him to hear that from his father. I'm very proud of him. But honestly, confession, adoration, rosary, Eucharist, those things will the sacraments of the church will work, because that's our access to Jesus Christ. And anybody who's tempted or considering praying 4 rosaries a day because they're addicts and they're desperate, 1, I encourage you to persevere at least 7 days. It's going to be harder at first. You might say, I started praying the rosary and the attacks got worse. Yes, they did, because the devil doesn't want you to persevere. So persevere 7 days, 4 times a day, and the devil will tap out. He'll be like, I'm done. I'm going to the guy next door because this guy's not going to stop. But some advice about that is don't do the Apostles' Creed before every rosary. Just do that in the beginning of the day, in the morning, because the rosary is meant to be like laps. So you just get on the track and then you stay on the track and you just do your laps throughout the day. Number 2, don't be too scrupulous about it, but do the best you can to, and we'll talk about mental prayer in your podcast.
Yes,
do the
so
best
excited.
you can before every mystery to, in your mind, imagine, let's say, the crucifixion as if you're really there, just long enough to where it makes an impression on you. So you imagine a large spike in the feet of Jesus, like, oh my gosh, how are you gonna have a spike go through both feet? Like, just long enough for it to have an impression, then you make your intention. And that's so important, because the devil attacks us in 2 ways: through our intellect and our imagination, that's one, and then through our passions. And so we have to drive him out of here. He tempts us primarily through our intellect and our imagination. So our imagination is poisoned. It's very important that we give Christ the opportunity to purify our imaginations. That also makes our prayer intention stronger, because as opposed to saying, God, give me this, give me purity, to some nebulous being that we don't see, I'm thinking of the passion of Christ. I'm offering the passion of Christ to the eternal Father. The Father saying, yeah, the passion of Christ is worth a lot, man. Here's the graces you stand in need of. So carry a rosary with you. Apostles' Creed only one time, because it'll destroy your poor soul on your second rosary doing that freaking Apostles' Creed again. No offense to the apostles. It's just too much.
It's true.
Don't be too scrupulous. Like, a bad rosary is better than no rosary. On days that the devil's on your back and you're just like, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, kingdom come, the way on others, that's better than nothing. The very words themselves are inspired by God. The devil might say to the Virgin Mary, he prayed a bad rosary. That was a horrible one. At the end of the day, a rosary is a rosary is a rosary is a rosary. It counts. Tally that sucker up. You're going on to the next one. So that's for people who are addicts and they're tired of it. Like, I've not known a soul alive. You'll either give up the rosary or you'll give up the sin. It has worked for every man that I've ever met who's persevered. Maybe at day 12, you commit a mortal sin. If you persevere and normally you were committing 30 mortal sins a month or 5 a day for every day of your life, it will come down to 1 mortal sin a month. And eventually it'll be no mortal sin, or it'll be 1 mortal sin every 6 months. Then it'll be 1 mortal sin every year. The devil will say anything to get you to stop. Persevere, 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 and never look back. That's my advice. If you want to win.
Absolutely. And I definitely want to reiterate to people here, like, this is why good fathers are so important. I don't think people realize that enough. The men, I feel like, feel demasculated these days. They feel like they
Yes.
have no power because of the feminist movement and like
Right.
all the wokeness and craziness going on. But we need strong fathers today more than ever. Society needs you more than
Yes.
ever today, but they hate you more than ever at the same time.
Yes.
And it's going to
Yes.
take some really strong dads to persevere, follow Christ, and to really sacrifice for his family. I think sacrificing is something that's not normalized today. We're used to being coddled and like, no, it's okay. Like, yes, you're allowed to feel this way. And it's
Right.
like, yes, feelings are important, etc., but we can't let them run society. We can't let them
Right.
run ourselves because we see where that's gotten us.
Yes.
And I had a lot of parents who have contacted me and they're just like, my kid's like addicted to their phone. I don't know what to do. I'm like, you are the parent. You bought
Yes.
them that phone. Take it
Yes.
away.
I
It's
like it.
not
You're
that
smart.
hard. And
Yeah.
I mean, and so many parents are like, oh, but that's going to cause like so many issues. I'm like, okay, do you want to deal with the moody kid you're dealing with now who's probably going through some secret trauma, something going
Right.
on? Or do you want to take away the phone, deal with tantrums for a week, and then that child is back to their happy self? Like, what? And suicide rates are so high these days, and it's getting
Yes.
younger and younger. It's crazy. And cell phones are one of the main leading causes for that.
Yes.
Cyberbullying, blackmail. There's just so much isolation going on. And these kids suffer in silence because they're not told how to handle social media properly. So I tell the parents, do not be afraid to take away that phone. Do
That's
not be
right.
afraid to completely like sell it on eBay. I don't care. Like, if you realize that the phone is impacting your child's mental health negatively, you have the responsibility, not just the response, but the duty as a parent and guardian to shield your child. And I think parents have a bigger responsibility today now ever than they did before. And just like how you would protect a baby physically, you have to protect a child mentally. So if you baby proof a room, you got to baby proof your kid's phone.
That's right.
So
you brought up so many good points. I'm just going to mention 3 things and touch upon 3 things. So it's not just your children. No offense, ladies. I'm sorry. This is unfortunate. But your husband also needs protection. And so if your husband does not pray with you or the family, I would assume that there's something hidden. Like, if there's no grace, it's impossible to fight the devil. The devil attacks the head of the family. It's just the reality of it. Ask your husband to pray the rosary with you every single day. I've had women reach out to me saying that their husbands, that they caught them doing this, they caught them doing that. And so they said, what should I tell him? He feels so guilty. I said, well, tell him you to make up for it. He needs to pray the rosary with you every single day. And then the husband begins to be reformed a little bit. They fall one time. They confess to the wife. This has happened so many times. They confess to the wife. The wife reaches out to me. What do I tell him now? He's very contrite. Tell him you want him to pray 4 rosaries a day. And then after that, the husband becomes such a zealous husband, such a model, such a leader. And that's what the world needs. When a man is 100% on fire for God, he's so attractive. He's so strong. Whether people like generally like him naturally or not, you're just drawn to somebody who's fulfilling the way that God made them to be. And if you're that kind of person like yourself, or if you're a young adult, get involved in youth ministry, get involved in catechesis. There's so many children that come from broken homes that don't have good fathers. So if you can recognize some virtue in yourself and you think, wow, I wish a guy like me would have been around when I was a kid, get involved. And sometimes, youth programs, I'm a youth minister. I've got a very popular ministry, and there are churches in my area that would balk at me coming over and talking to their high school teens. They'll say, Mr. Gabe, I don't think so. He's so controversial. He is always talking about hell and the devil. I was like, y'all always bring this to me because I'm the only one willing to talk about it. So when we talk about things, it's important that it comes from a place of love and not a place of like, I'm here to do battle. Like, whenever I do battle, it's only because I love the souls in my care. And so love. And the beautiful thing is, all the things I told, like, that I recommended: praying 4 rosaries a day, going to confession once a week, going to adoration or going to mass if possible every day. This is the beauty of God's plan. If you did these things, they'll make you holy. You become a saint. So why did God allow this? To make you a saint. And that's what the world needs. The world needs more saints today. And
It's so true.
you will, with that power of the help of the Virgin Mary, you will crush the head of the serpent, and you will go from being a slave to a liberator of souls. I give you my word. I've seen it happen so many times. Do not give up. There is freedom. I'm a perfect example of freedom. Amber's a perfect example of freedom. Seriously, like, don't
It's
quit.
so true.
See?
And I highly suggest too, for those who struggle with same-sex attraction, I just did a live stream with Emmanuel, because
Yes.
he struggles with SSA, but he's
Yes.
celibate and he's very, very good at explaining that. And so I just did a live stream with them. So if you're interested in that, you can go see that too. Because I know it's not just, there's so many different types of lust. There's so many different types of
Right.
sexual sin.
Yes.
And it's so rampant today. And so many kids are getting confused about their sexuality. They think that their sexuality defines them and
Yeah.
it's who they are. And it's like, no, that's not what defines you. It's a part of you. And that's important that, like, but if it's not who you are. There's so much more to you as a person than your sexuality. And, if you struggle with something, it's not a reason to give into it. I think it's a lot easier to give into it sometimes because we're getting affirmed. There's all this
Mhm.
affirmation that we're receiving from people like, oh, no, it's fine. You can do that. Like, it's not going to hurt anyone. And it's like eventually down the road, I mean, how many years since same sex marriage was legalized in 2016?
Yeah.
Now we're seeing like detransitioners talking about their horror
Right.
stories. We're seeing all this sexual abuse come out with minors because of certain things. Like, it's insane. And so this, I think, is going to be really important to give people hope that there is freedom outside of it,
Yes.
and that,
There is.
Jesus Christ, he sat with sinners and he told them to come as they are, but not stay as they are. And
That's
that's
right.
so important.
Yeah. So I just want to thank you for addressing this topic. I know it's kind of an embarrassing thing, but it's obvious that you have a great love for your viewers and you want to see people living in truth and in joy. I just ask you to continue doing what you're doing, continue talking about topics that are not popular, because you're right. Everybody is struggling with this. They're struggling with their identity and they need to be able to find answers. And so if you're watching this, share this live stream with families, share this live stream with friends. If you have friends who have children and they're struggling on cell phone, no cell phone, share this with them, because I will testify, every high schooler that I know that has free reign, maybe there's 1 or 2 small exceptions. They generally tend to be young women. Young women, for some reason, tend to have more virtue, especially if they've been raised well, guarded under this protective bubble, but still nobody's free from temptation. They do, maybe, I don't know. They don't come to me with their problems, so maybe they have problems as well. But I don't know a soul alive who's not struggling, but you can have freedom if you persevere and share the information that will set people free.
It's so true. And thank you so much, Gabby, for coming on
My
here and
pleasure. It's an
discussing
honor.
it. It's so good to just have a conversation about this because I
Yes.
think too many people are very strict, but people need to
Right.
know that it's like you're loved. And because you're
Right.
loved, that's why we're doing this, is because we
Right.
want you to be in friendship with God and we want to help you
Yes.
combat these sins that are destroying your life. And so thank you so much. And where can my viewers find you real quick?
So if you go to YouTube and type in Gabi After Hours, you'll find my YouTube channel.
Awesome. All right. Well,
And
thank
they
you
can
so
find
much.
me on your podcast coming up
That's
next.
true. I'm so excited for that. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, thank you so much, Gabby. And I
Thank
hope
you.
that this live stream helped you guys.
Yes.
And we will talk to you guys next time. Bye.